You're listening to Cinema Snarks. I'm Larry,
And I'm Ren.
and we are going to tell you how we really feel. And today we are telling you how we feel about Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. And we're going to dive into superhero origin films. So the Cinema Snarks were back at the theater together this past weekend. Yay. It's always a fun occurrence when we
Yeah.
actually see the
It
film
was also like a
together.
whole movie party. We had like a bunch of people.
It was. If you don't know me particularly, whenever it's like a staple film or some sort of record film, if you will, I try to get as many people to that theater opening weekend as possible.
He rounds up the troops.
Yes, for diversity films
Yeah.
specifically, female leads, minority leads. Earlier this year, we did it with In the Heights.
You didn't do it with Candyman, did you?
I
But
didn't do it. It's a
horror
little.
is harder. Horror
It's
is hard.
harder. It's
You gotta get like
harder.
it's hard to get a whole crew, right? You can't get a Leslie to come see
No, you
Candyman.
can't go. You can't get a.
You can't get a
Leslie.
Patrick either.
No, exactly. Yeah. So what did we do? We've done like Wonder Woman. We
Mhm.
did
Captain
like
Marvel, we did.
Captain Marvel. That was also for my birthday because, if another fun fact, I share a birthday with International Women's Day, and thus Captain Marvel was like my birthday
He's all
thing.
about those badass women on his birthday.
I mean, seems fitting enough, right?
I'm
Yeah.
for it.
And so Marvel released their first, and really the first across any of them, Asian lead.
I think
Yay.
you just say Asian because I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure
no.
they haven't done anything with any Asians as the lead.
No.
I know, but I mean, they are gonna
No.
have. They are about to have the Eternals with
But I mean, I don't know. I don't think an Asian is the lead there either. So
he's one of the Eternals.
I mean, yes. So we have
It
Kumail
doesn't count
Nanjiani.
if it's Kumail
He's
Nanjiani.
in there, but I don't think he's going to be like one of the main Eternals, if I'm being honest.
But he got so ripped.
He got so ripped. Well, I mean,
If
let's
I
just
had
say
all
no.
the Marvel money to get ripped, I would get ripped as well. I wouldn't care if I was big or not.
I will
You're gonna
say
pay for this?
Salma Hayek's character is the leader of the Eternals, but I have a feeling Richard Madden is going to be the film's lead.
It seems focused on him and
Gemma
the
Chan.
what's
There
her
you
name?
go. Gemma Chan. She's
Gemma Chan.
an Asian lead, an Asian female lead. For
Oh
the
yeah,
film.
we're. I mean, to be fair, we've been pretty not enough, but we've been pretty comfortable with Asian women as love interests for a little while, as like sexual objects. That's
always
fine.
right. That's always how it is. Really, with all of the minority women, like the Latina bombshells, the like weird lust for Black women that has existed from the days of slavery, and then the Asian trophy wife trope that surfaced and has been there for some time now. That's unfortunate, but there you go.
But what's exciting is having something like Shang-Chi, where you have lots of sexy Asian men all over the place.
Lots of sexy Asian people, period.
Well, people, period.
Running around the screen. And
you have an Asian, you have sexy Asian men who are intended to be sexy, right? It's like, they spent a very long time just culturally and in general, and there's a very long history behind it of Asian men being emasculated and not, allowed to be seen as sexual beings. So it is, which is crazy because hot damn, with all that martial arts work, those bodies in motion, I can't.
Yeah,
I'm for it. I actually had like a big thing about like, woo, sexy Asian. There used to be like an Axe commercial where it was like this super hot Asian dude without a shirt on, and I was like, this is wave of the future. Everyone, get on board.
I know we're finally getting there, where we have a few different leading Asian men right now, kind of emerging, which is exciting.
So
finally,
I'm not sure if I'm allowed to. Am I allowed to? I'm not. Probably shouldn't be. Just is it okay if I objectify the men too, because they aren't normally objectified, or should we just like not create sexual objects out of a race in general.
I feel
I
like
don't know.
here on
I
the
just so everybody knows, I find all of the races sexy.
listen,
Just sexual
here
objects all the way around,
if you're
no
not
matter what.
prepared for thirst happening, tune out of any podcast or
Because
show I'm
yes,
involved in because I'm gonna thirst. I'm sorry. I don't regardless of the race, we were thirsting last week over freaking Candyman. We're gonna
yes.
be thirsting
Oh.
this week too. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Whichever race where happens to be upon my screen, if they're sexy, I'm gonna talk about it. And
Yes.
we're gonna talk about Simu
Care.
Liu today.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So Shang-Chi is the latest from Marvel Cinematic Universe and what feels like the official start to phase 4 of Marvel when it comes to the films. Technically, Spider-Man Far From Home came out after Endgame, and of course, just a couple of months ago, we had Black Widow. But both of those films seemed so heavily rooted in the past that it feels like Shang-Chi with a brand new hero, a new story that is actively moving us into their next phase, feels like the official greeting to the phase 4 of the MCU.
We're laughing if you're watching the video. It's my dog who has gotten very insistent that he be on me because I have not been home all day. But it feels a little bit appropriate because he is half pug, and the pugs were originally the royal dog of the Chinese dynasties. So it's you know,
for they were bred down.
It's in theme.
He's a little spug.
My spaniel pug mix. Okay.
Well, this time we are gonna probably bring a little bit of the snark. We were actually quite snarky with each other right there in the movie theater as we were leaving, I will say. We're not gonna be bringing the snark to y'all, but we have differing opinions when it comes to Shang-Chi. So
to be clear, I didn't hate it. I just found it boring and thoroughly mediocre, which I am in the minority. I am in the definite minority. It is very clear. Although what I suspect is it is going. I think when people go back and they watch it again and they're not as like excited about it in like a few years, I don't think it's going to rank very high on anybody's Marvel listings. I just don't. It's just not. There's nothing spectacular about it except for that bus fight, which was sick, and the music was sick in that moment. Everything else was like, it was fine. I felt bored while I was watching it, Larry. I got like towards the end, and it was so very predictable. It like follows the beats of the hero's journey, just like beat for beat for beat for beat. So there's just like nothing surprising that happened at all. Nothing was surprising. There was like, we couldn't give you spoilers if we wanted to because
yes, we can.
It's all pretty straight up immediately.
Ren, how dare they utilize a tried and true historic formula for an action?
It would be okay for it to be, it would be okay. And they do that often. I was thinking about like, Harry Potter follows that storyline, Spider-Man follows that storyline, Star Wars follows, but in those movies, the characters are all very charming and there's a lot of humor that keeps you engaged. And that is the thing that is lacking in this film. Awkwafina, they hired Awkwafina to be their like sidekick, comic relief, and I don't think I laughed at her genuinely even once. I perhaps chuckled. I couldn't name even one joke from the movie.
Yeah, I think so. Part of it was I was listening to one of my friends' reviews, and they do like suggestions for other films to watch based on the current film they're reviewing. Mm-hmm. And so many of her suggestions starred Awkwafina because she was suggesting a lot of Asian Hollywood films. And I definitely think that's a problem. So that's just a general thing for me right now, is that
She's
Every Asian film that
has an
Hollywood comes out
Aquafina.
with has
Yeah.
Aquafina in it, whether it be The Farewell, whether it be Crazy Rich Asians. Aquafina is just,
She also
she
doesn't
gets cast
have
in literally every single Asian
also doesn't
thing that
have much of
happens.
a range. She's
Well, no.
kind of the same thing every time. She's just
So there was a
like
glimpse here. So there's a scene where she has like this heart to heart with Shang-Chi. And I just wish we kind of got more of that from her because I do think she's very good when she's allowed. Well, not when she's allowed, because I think
she's spectacular in The Farewell.
she
That
pulls
was
it back
yeah.
and does tap in. I think she's one of those comedians who you are kind of like Melissa McCarthy when you see her doing these terrible comedies all the time. You're like, ah, but the actress is there. Like,
Yeah.
and I feel that way because we got a glimpse of it in this film. And like you said, we saw it in The Farewell. I feel like Aquafina could really diversify her profile and then make her comedies maybe more fun, and seeing
Mhm.
her return to that more fun if she would just do the serious a little bit more. And her comedy is very, there's not a lot of, you can't really change it up with her comedy. She has a very specific style,
Mhm.
and you don't have a lot of range within that style of comedy that she presents. So she's the same in
Yeah.
virtually
And it's
everything she does.
I just haven't found any of it to be like, I tend to really appreciate things that are like clever jokes, clever wordplay and stuff. And a lot of her comedy is in like delivery. She's not like, I wouldn't call her a witty comedian. It's more about like her style and her like boisterous way of being that makes her funny, which is I don't find that funny. I see her as humorous. I can see that she's like supposed to be a humorous person, but I just haven't the thing I liked her best in so far, like funny wise, I enjoyed her in Raya. And I also really enjoyed The Farewell.
She
But
just
yeah,
has, I think her voice is just so unique that for
she
voice work, I think it could, she comes across well.
yeah,
So for
she
like
has a
Raya,
fabulous, nice, raspy voice. But
yeah,
yeah,
there's another Asian property that featured Aquafina. She's literally in all of the Asian things. And
yeah.
just like, okay. But
So
we have to give a disclaimer here. Ren is a superhero hater.
I do have a bit of the superhero fatigue.
H8ER.
I am not a hater. First of all, I have seen literally every single Marvel film twice.
Just because her
Ant-Man and the
husband
Wasp. I've
forced
only
her
seen
to
that one.
see it the second time.
That is not true. He didn't force me. I could absolutely have refused. But it was definitely fun to like go back and revisit them and like re-rank them. But I definitely that was where I got this kind of concept of like I think people rewatch Shang-Chi and it'll be lower down. Like there's a lot of films that I feel like when the superhero films first came out, it was like really, really exciting. And it was like, oh, they're just very high energy films. And you got all these cool fight scenes. And there's this big reveal and there's this thing. And there's so much happening when it first comes out that then when you watch it again, it's like quality as an actual piece of film is you actually see how it is as like a story. And you're like, oh, this is not as good as I thought it was. Like I think one of the big ones that I was not as big of a fan of was I remember Spider-Man Homecoming.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people liked it a lot when it first came out, and I liked it when it first came out, and Patrick really liked it. And then we rewatched it, and it was like, oh, that was fine. That was it's kind
that
of
one
like
was always kind of mid for me, to be honest.
yeah. So I just think there's like a big level of like initial excitement, and like it also kind of like sucks because like I'm happy that they I don't know. I feel conflicted about this. Let me tell you how I feel.
Okay.
I'm glad that they're making movies about women and people of color. I find it fucking stupid that I had to wait for 10 years through of men, just white men movies before they did this. And like, that was something that I kind of like thought was a little bit weird. So one of the things that kind of like just rubbed me the wrong way about this film was that the only, other than the like post-credit cutscenes, the only other Marvel character from the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe that they interact with is Wong. The only other Asian in the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. So like that to me feels a little bit like, I don't know if tokenism is the word, but it feels like they're kind of like, this is an Asian film. See, we're doing an Asian film. Look, we have the other Asian, and he's here in our Asian film. And it's like, you know, that's not the point. That's not what we want. We don't want just Asian films.
Well, technically, Abomination was in here too, but
is Abomination Asian? Because he was Tim Roth in the.
Yeah, no, he's not Asian. I'm just saying, technically, the other Avenger, you're
Marvel
talking about
character. The other one, I guess. Hardly. Anyways,
I mean,
I get what you're saying.
They changed his look, though. Even I don't know. It took me a second to even. He looked different. I don't know. Tim Roth was him again.
I didn't know until Patrick told me that he was supposed to be Abomination. I was like, oh, that's okay, great, sure.
Very weird. Very strange cameo.
I think we don't want racial bubble films. We want to be okay with. I want him to be. I want hot Asian leads because they're hot and they're good actors and they fit well into the character and they have chemistry with the person that is playing opposite them. That's what we want. I don't need an Asian culture film because I can watch Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which is fantastic and is all Asian actors, Asian director, Asian production crew. China has plenty of film options if I just want to watch an Asian film about Asia. So that just felt a little weird for me that like, we're going to put Wong in here. Look at us. Especially because then it like reminds me of the fact that then they also cast their Buddhist, the ancient one is a white lady, which was very weird and strange at the time and still weird and strange. It just reminds me of what they did not that long ago. So that was very strange to me. They did throw a Ben Kingsley in here, which I think is funny. I don't know if Ben Kingsley is Asian. I know he played Gandhi in a film, but I don't know if that was.
So obviously he's British, but his like actual heritage. I looked it up once before because I also was curious.
I think he might be, but you just can't.
He's either Middle Eastern or because I don't know if he's actually Indian. Because I don't think he's Indian when he played Gandhi, to be honest.
His father is Gujarati.
Okay.
So he is half Indian. Okay, great.
Okay,
excellent.
Perfect. Great. So
Asian, there we go. You have another Asian in the film. But not
a direct tie-in to a previous Marvel film.
Yes.
An apology. An apology to how badly they butchered that character previously, which I enjoyed. I enjoyed that they were self-aware to be like, oh shit, we're actually introducing the Mandarin now. Maybe we should address what we pulled before. But so Shang-Chi, one thing obviously everybody is talking about with this film is the action, and that was part of what we started with. So for the first half of the film or so, we are pretty martial arts heavy with the action. We go through actually several different styles of martial arts.
And Simu Liu?
Simu Liu. Yeah.
Simu Liu. He's like an action star and he is like sick. It's incredible. So this is where I'm going to whine again. Would you like to continue with I don't want to interrupt you about the martial arts thing before I criticisms.
No, I think it's just I like that they displayed more than just one style. We got trust me, I am no martial arts expert. And when we were discussing what we were going to talk about today, outside of a couple of the staple films, martial arts films are probably a pretty big blind spot for me. So I couldn't tell you, but we get the more dance style, the real flowy martial arts several times, because that's kind of like what they decided Tallow was going to be. And then on the bus scene, we get a much more aggressive, stylized form as well.
So someone will probably correct me because I might be totally wrong, but I think that my understanding, and I don't know a lot about martial arts. I believe that there's like a form called Aikido, which is kind of based on that idea of using your opponent's force
Mm.
against them. And it's not like against, it's, it's like a balance sort of a
Yep.
thing. And I could totally be, I know that is the rough, that is my rough, I've never done Aikido understanding of it that somebody explained to me probably a decade ago. And I may have been maybe misremembering. So just go ahead and correct me for sure if I'm wrong. I did think that is neat, right? That they took some different styles of martial arts fighting. And yeah, other than that, the choreography and the action in the bus scene was very, very cool. And the music that went along with it was also very, very cool. But outside of that, I just didn't feel like there was anything very new or interesting that was happening in terms of the choreography. And like, I was very into Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon and Hero and House of Flying Daggers. And I watched all of those kind of magical martial arts fighting films that came out around that time period. So it was just like, I don't know. I think overall, I said it I said out outside of the movie theater, and I knew it when I said it was one of the most pretentious things I could possibly say about a film. It felt very derivative. The whole film felt very derivative. There just didn't seem to me to be really anything particularly original or innovative or different or exciting about this film. And that's what I think was the biggest kind of like boredom factor for me, is that it was just like, okay, like we talk about like gore, right? This was just kind of relate it back. Like there's only so many places that you can kill people, but sometimes you watch a movie and they've come up with these really creative ways of ripping people apart. And like, there's only so many times so many ways you can throw a punch, but I know a lot of people who could tell me that there are tons and tons of different ways. And you watch fight scenes sometimes and you're like, that's so cool. But like, they fought on the scaffolding outside of the building. Okay. Like I haven't seen that before.
Friend. I see. This is what she is wilding out. That scene on the outside of that building was so good.
It was fine.
It was amazing. The bus scene, both
the
stellar.
bus scene was cool, but the bus scene was innovative. I've never seen fighting on a bus, right, where you have this, it's tiny, and then you have all of these people who are in there with them, and then you have this weird dude with his camera that's recording it and giving commentary that's like humor on the side. That was probably one of the most entertaining points of the entire film. That was like
great.
Yeah, I enjoyed the film a lot, like at the very beginning, and I think it really I felt a lot like I was not carried along with it by the end, and it was like, okay, I guess we're fighting giant CGI monsters now. We could do that.
And then
too.
Ren, no Marvel film has taken us into fantasy like this film has. That third act is a pure fantasy film, so it transforms.
Here's what sucks. I loved that fantasy world, and I am upset I didn't get to spend more time there with all those cool creatures. Like I really wanted to know what all of those things were and what their little powers are, and like how they operate with this community. Yeah, like that's for 2 hours. If you're gonna make me sit there for 2 hours, I need to be entertained for 2 hours, and I was not. And that was another like magical moment. It just felt like a lot of like meh. All right, I know what's happening. Followed by, ooh, that's a very pretty visual. Oh, look at those cool creatures. Like that was like a highlight, definitely. I wish they had spent a lot, and they could have absolutely spent way more fucking time in that world. I understand that it's like expensive if you're going to do all of that stuff, but like they end up in this world. There's, and he spends some time training in that world. Like there could have been so much more of the like training and origin story part of it. And I think that's another
of this film is his family.
Sure.
So you have to focus on trying to build and establish the dynamics of the family members. So him to his sister and him to his father, and even his father to the sister, even though that one's the least explored.
So that I just have a lot of complaints about the film. The family dynamic is I think the problem with me for the family dynamic is I don't really understand what the problem is. They're very vague about like they tell the backstory of what happened in these flashes as if they're going to reveal something interesting, and it's not interesting at all. It's just like you think. It's his mother died and his dad was upset and so went back to being the like power hungry monster he was before he met the mother. And then his son was trained as an assassin and has those skills too, and decided he didn't want to do that life, but now he's like apart. I don't know. I also like it's weird. I don't know how many spoilers I can give you. Like, I just don't understand. Spoiler. He shows up and his dad is like, I knew where you were the whole time. Well, what the fuck was the point of the first hour of this movie then? Like, if you just knew where he was, then we weren't running from him and there wasn't a thing. He was never going to hurt you. Like, they made it seem like he was this super lethal, evil guy. And then he shows up and he's like, I always know where my children are. He's like, Dad. He's not really this like terrifying presence. And it also doesn't seem like at any point in the film that he's like gonna kill his children, which is kind of the implication at the beginning. Mm-hmm. It really just seems like he'll kill anybody else, but he really does seem to like love his children. So like a lot of the tension of the like, I don't know, problem of it. And it's also just weird because he's like, I'm going to kill my father because my father is responsible for my mother's death somehow. I don't know. The logic was just like weird. I didn't really follow the like family.
Just because he loved them, he was still abusive to his children. Very much so. Sure. Neglectful and abusive.
Sure.
Particularly mentally abusive.
Sure.
So there was already that resentment, and it was, he blamed his father because of his past deeds and that whole thing.
I don't know. Well, okay, so but like it just doesn't make any like logical moral sense, right? So he's like, it's my dad's fault because he did things in the past. And then those people came and killed my mother. And then my dad killed those people who killed his mother because they killed his mother because he killed their guys back then. And it's like this, it's this endless, like what, either you have a moral compass or you don't. And it doesn't seem like there's a very clear moral compass there. The other big problem is that adorable. I find Simu Liu as an adorable human being. He has not interesting as a character whatsoever. He's very cute. He's very sweet, but like there's just his story is way less compelling. You have the story, the two stories that are really interesting to me. I want to know about his fucking sister. Yes. His badass sister. Her story sounds way more interesting. I don't give a fuck about Shang-Chi. And that was another like weird thing for me is that it seems like she is arguably better than him. She figured out how to be just as good a fighter as him by herself without any help. And when she escaped, she started a fucking empire while her brother lazed about and was a valet for decades. So like, she's just way more interesting as a character overall. And I think that's another thing that kind of rubs me the wrong way of it's like, it's another case of Marvel taking the more interesting sister and relegating it to her like the supporting sister role.
That's definitely I think that's a definite valid negative.
So that
because they establish her really interesting. Like she probably would be my favorite character in this film, but they stop focusing on her very much. Like as we move forward after she's introduced, she gets a large intro and then she kind of tapers off to be a very background character where it feels like even in the climax, it feels like they should at least be some sort of team. Like it should be like a team up kind of situation. And it's not really a team. Like she's still just there to support him and it seems like they should it seems like they should be a team, except, well, we called the movie Shang-Chi, so we have to make him the hero. Yeah. It's like, well, maybe you should have just made a fucking movie about a pair of siblings. That would have been, and you know what? If they would have made that the focus of the film, I think that would have been way more interesting to me. And it would have been unique, right? You don't have siblings in the Marvel universe. I don't know any superhero siblings and the issues that they have together. That sounds like an interesting storyline to me. But this like neglectful, abusive father family issues. I'm the prodigal son and I have father issues. Like,
how many fucking times have we seen that fucking story in the Marvel universe,
And
right?
honestly, the closest we have to like heroes that are siblings is like Thor and Loki, which happen to be
Right.
everyone's favorite pair. Like everyone loves Thor and Loki because they have an interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
And if you were to have adapted that to where one of them isn't just like a sneaky backstabbing anti-hero, it could have made for a really compelling, especially with their dynamic already established in the film.
I also think there's something so much more interesting. And it seems like I think they're setting her up for a show or something like that.
I think I don't know what the 10 Rings is going to be, a show, a movie, or what's happening.
Seems like there's some sort of a setup for her storyline continuing on. But she does seem like it does seem like the relationship between the two of them could be a very, very interesting one, because she certainly has a little bit more complex sort of morality going on there. She's got a different sort of like view of the world, and her development is just really, she's a way more interesting character than her brother. And I think that just kind of makes it hard. The other thing is the dad is a way more interesting character. He's also an incredible actor. I think that's maybe one of the like the problems there is that like it's really hard to care as much about the hero of your film, who's like the main character that you're supposed to be following and connecting and like caring about his journey, when the like anti-hero villain is so very engaging. Like every little facial expression, and it just the energy in his body is incredible. The like
Tony Leung is a great actor, and I mean, I guess that's one of the things I liked. This is it's hard to categorize him on if we're categorizing him as a straight up villain or what he really is. He leads to the ultimate villain storyline. So I guess
Killmonger vibes, kind of a little.
And honestly, but he's one of their best villains, because that's one of Marvel's big problems. Is so often their villains are terrible. Like so often they just bring nothing villains to the screen to menace and be nothing. Yeah. And here, much like Killmonger, actually, is probably the last time we saw it. We get somebody really interesting and someone really charismatic. Yeah. And it's an interesting thing to see this person whose entire story, what he's working toward, is like out of grief. And I don't know.
I just wanted to really quick say the other really, really awesome, very original, fun fight scene that I really enjoyed was the one where he is falling in love with Shang-Chi's mother. That is, I loved that they basically took this like slow motion martial arts trope and merged it with the slow motion falling in love trope. Such a great thing. Like, it's so obvious, but you've also never seen it before. And it was just so cute, right?
Everyone
and both of those actors were incredible, right? Like just the tiniest little crook of their mouth and the communication in their eyes, and you can see them falling in love just through fight moves and slow motion glances at each other.
That's definitely one of the big highlight scenes of the film.
But that's also
happens
at the
very
beginning.
Early. It happens at the opening monologue.
I liked the movie a lot more at the beginning, and then I just kind of got bored and deflated, and like I was like, I want to watch this character. I don't care about this character. I also like, I don't know. So I think that it's an interesting problem to have in a film where like I'm bored because your supporting characters are more interesting to me, and I wish I was watching a story about them. And the fact that they're so interesting has made now the fact that I'm watching the story about this much less interesting character more glaringly obvious to me, so that I am actively now bored. I'm like, can I go back to the sister? Why isn't she fighting? She can command the dragon too. They both had the jade thing. They both have the same blood. Why not?
I have to say,
why does he get the 10 rings?
One thing,
he's a boy. Anyways, go ahead.
One thing that I was disappointed in is we spend the time learning that this town, this little village of Talo, we see it with Michelle Yeoh and her character, as well as the mother character,
who is tragically underutilized.
Oh,
criminally.
That's Marvel's thing. Get a fantastic actor and actress, particularly if they're a little bit older, and have them do nothing. I mean, that's the Marvel trope at this point, and it's just frustrating, and I hate it. But we obviously establish they get superpowers basically from the Great Protector. In that final battle, nobody uses them. Nobody.
Yes.
They use their weapons that have the dragon scales that can take these down, but we don't see anybody bending the air and like using these powers. They're all doing nothing except for Shang-Chi, and Aquafina now suddenly in a day has become an expert markswoman
now.
Now you're just like, excuse. I mean, what they should have. I told somebody else this because what they should have done for comedic effect is kind of zoom in past her, but then see that hers like fell into the water and somebody was standing right behind her.
Yes,
that's what they should have done. I think in that moment,
have her like trip and it goes in. It like looks like it's gonna not go, and then it goes anyways, or whatever. Like
something. Or you could have had like Michelle Yeoh use the air to push it to where it needed to go. There's a lot of things that would have made that moment a lot better, because
or make any sense at all, right? That it was just like
that was one of those that.
Do we really need to
even
make
if
her
you
part
love
of the
the
hero
film
story?
Even if you love this film, I feel like everybody universally was shaking their head at that Aquafina moment, because it was one of those movie moments where you're like, how? Okay, we have to suspend all disbelief.
Right. Well, it was right, because we need to convey this idea of if you don't shoot, if you never take a shot, you'll never hit a target. Which I guess that's like her whole I don't care about her storyline. It's underdeveloped, and so I don't need her like succeeding at the end, because I didn't care the entire time. I also don't think that the chemistry between Simu Liu and Aquafina was very good. I just like wasn't vibing.
And now they're talking about the seeds being laid for a romantic relationship, and I'm like, God, please.
No. I don't even think they're very good as like a friend duo. They just don't have a great rapport.
I will say I did love the karaoke thing that they did a couple times in this movie. I thought it was really funny.
That's a fun. So let me give you that's another piece of my like with this film is it's very much the Asian film. Look, we have Chinese dragons and they sing karaoke for fun. And we only hang out with other Asians.
I mean, if you're going to do a story about a great protector, though, Ren, I mean, what other mythical creature would it be?
Sure, I know, but I also am like, is that the only? We had a whole conversation about this the other. Is that the only mythology they have? I know it's not, but for some reason, that's like the only thing Americans are interested in right now are like Chinese dragons. Give us the Chinese dragons. It's all we want.
Period. Again, we talked about it. It's Game of Thrones really tripped off dragon mania again. Yeah. Ever since Game of Thrones got huge, dragons have become the hit once again.
But how about we use the Chinese dragon as a gateway into the other vast and interesting stores of their thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of years of history.
Well, maybe, I mean, that's what would have been interesting, particularly we saw the Nine Tails, and we saw the deer with the like human face. Both things, I think Nine Tails, I know for sure, is rooted in mythology. But I think even that deer creature is as well. Probably even the little pig bird chicken is probably too. I'm not positive on that. But we could maybe go that route too, and that's a way to start introducing it. I don't know, who knows if they'll do anything with any of those ever again. I hope so, but I
think you could make bank off of a Asian Fantastic Beasts, basically. Yes. Could we just do me a spin-off of Shang-Chi?
Hear how excited Graham was about that idea? He was like on board. As soon as you mentioned it, he barked. He was excited for that.
You want it? Come in.
That's what he wants to see.
He's ready for it. Fantastic Beasts, but about your history. He would actually hate it. He would sit there growling at the screen the whole time.
Probably. I mean, but we were talking about this coming on to the podcast, and obviously that'll be a good segue. How do you think this ranks amongst the MCU's origin stories? So we have Iron Man, we have Thor, we have Captain America, the First Avenger, Guardians of the Galaxy is an origin story for that team. Ant-Man.
Oh yeah.
Ant-Man is an origin story. I mean, some people are debating on whether Black Panther counts as a story or not.
His origin story, that's the thing, is like his origin story kind of starts in Civil War,
Yeah.
but also it really starts when he's born. He doesn't have much of an origin story because he like knows when he's born he's the king of Wakanda, he's
he
the
doesn't-
Black Panther, and that's his job. So it's
Yeah.
like you don't get much of an origin story with Black Panther. You just get like a
just
and I don't think you need one for him.
a solo
Like,
film.
yeah, I'm there. You've explained it to me.
And
I
same
got
thing,
it. He's the king.
Homecoming with Spider-Man. He's already
That's not a-
Spider-Man by the time he becomes.
Exactly. That's not a origin story. And like, on the one hand, I understand Marvel. Like, so it seems like generally what Marvel kind of did was if with the characters that we already like know their origin story, we didn't necessarily need to get the origin story. But I think, honestly, and I've talked to some friends about this, that they actually kind of gave me the idea that I now agree with, that that's one of the problems with Homecoming and with the Spider-Man in this universe. The lack of the origin story just kind of removes him from what Spider-Man really was, with that whole friendly neighborhood Spider-Man thing. You don't get any of that.
If you get onto Spider-Man Twitter, girl, they will agree with you. I mean, there is a war constantly about people who don't like the MCU Spider-Man because he doesn't feel weighted in that Spider-Man origin.
He does. I like Tom Holland. I think he's adorable, and I think there's like lots of fun moments in the film, and I actually really think Tom Holland is. I think Tom Holland does the best with the Spider-Man infight comedy. I think he kills that. I think that, and this version of Spider-Man is the most entertaining with the infight things. Yeah. But yeah, I think the origin story of Spider-Man is really important, and I think it is one of my favorite origin stories of a superhero, period. I mean, Spider-Man is one of my favorites, if not my favorite, period, superhero. And yeah, his whole origin story is like, it's why he's a good person, right? He's kind of a shit when he gets his powers initially. He just like doesn't really give a fuck and is just using his powers to make some extra money on the side. And he, has this kind of Bruce Wayne-y sort of like, oh, Uncle Ben dies and it's tragic, there's all of this. But there's also something about like, because he's that friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, he has this very grounding life that he lives inside of. Whereas in Marvel, his like father figure is fucking Tony Stark, the richest man in the world, richest, most famous man in the world. And he has, his suits are handed to him, right? Like, it's not as fun if Spider-Man doesn't develop his own sick suit and his better spider webbing and like create
unless they're Tobey Maguire and it comes out of their wrist.
Yeah. Unless
you're Tobey Maguire and you're literally a spider that has the web come out of your body.
What a weird. That's weird. I'm glad that. Yeah,
I mean, yeah, that was a very strange take on the Spider-Man powers. I will say that.
Even animated Spider-Man had shooters.
Yeah, so they decided against that with Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland. They're like, no, we're gonna actually do shooters. We're not gonna do that weird organic web.
I think it was it one of the versions. One of them I thought did a good job of explaining and being like, basically, it was my spidey sense that gave me a sense of how to create the solution I would need to make the web.
I think it was Andrew Garfield.
Yeah, I think so. And that I'm like, yeah, that makes sense to me. I'm like, yes, I will say that feels like a valid connection.
So when it comes to the live action ones, I do think Spider-Man, the original Tobey Maguire one, is my favorite of the Spider-Man origins when it comes to Peter Parker. However, My favorite origin is actually for Miles Morales for Spider-Man Into the
Oh,
Spider-Verse.
yeah.
I just think they do such a good job of making it a coming of age movie
Yeah.
for Miles in that film and really building up to him
I
becoming
very
Spider-Man.
attached. Yeah, I am so very attached to Peter Parker that I
course.
was like, Into the Spider-Verse, I don't know. And I really avoided seeing it for a very long time. And then saw it and was like, oh my God, this is incredible.
Yeah.
This is actually incredible. I regret all of the time I spent not having seen that movie.
I mean, it's
I agree.
understandable. You get attached to one.
Yeah, totally.
Sure.
But that was, you're right. It's a fantastic origin story. It's super fun.
Yeah.
And it is just an origin story, right? It's all about him. And so that was one of the things I was noticing with Shang-Chi. And I said, like, I normally really enjoy origin stories. I like that process of like watching the character grow and struggle and learn and stuff. And like, just to hop back to the beginning, I think that might be another issue I had with Shang-Chi is that like, he doesn't really struggle very much. You don't see him grow very much either. It's a very slight sort of like moral family struggle, but you don't see him go from I'm a totally normal human being to, oh my God, now I have superpowers.
Yeah.
You don't see him go from I'm I don't have any money and now I have all the money in the world and it's a problem. Or
even Iron Man, whose origin is much more immoral,
yes.
where he has the money, he has the influence, but he starts to see the effects of his behavior, and that's his origin story to become Iron Man is, oh shit, I need to pay repercussion basically to the damage I've caused the world. And it's
I have a friend who insists he really has a problem with Tony Stark, does not like Tony Stark. He thinks that Iron Man effectively created a whole bunch of problems and never really solved anything, just kind of like ignored the fact that he had sent out all of those weapons and wars and caused so much destruction, and then just like was basically morally atoning by trying to solve other problems or creating new problems and then solving those.
Ultron, we're looking at you. But I do think Marvel spent enough time kind of being like, Tony, you caused this shit. I don't think they fully got there though, because once again, I was like, Wanda, I feel this is a complete side note, but Pepper, you should be paying for Wanda's therapy because it is completely Tony's fault where she was come WandaVision. All of it can be traced back to Tony Stark and his foolery, from her parents dying to Ultron, who killed her brother, to Vision, who was also a Tony Stark creation, who she fell in love with. Every problem in Wanda's life originated at Tony Stark. But
the greatest thing that ever happened to her in her life originated from Tony Stark.
Also love. But yeah, I was like, Pepper, why ain't you helping homegirl at least a little bit? Like, come on, Pepper.
She is. What does fucking Wanda do for money? She's clearly got like money. She got to I'm sure she's giving her money, Larry. They just don't like cover that part of the story where Pepper like writes the check and is that sucks, man.
Gwyneth, we're gonna need you to sit down for 5 minutes and just let us film you writing checks.
I don't need to see Gwyneth Paltrow on screen anymore at all, ever.
She doesn't even know which Marvel movies she's in anymore, so we can just write her out. We don't need Pepper. No more Tony, no more Pepper.
No more Tony, no more Pepper. I'm happy with that.
Good. But so we have that. If you watched our ranking though, you saw that, I mean, origin stories were pretty high. We had Iron Man very high. Yes. We had, I have it kind of in the middle. Captain America, the First Avenger, you loved.
I love Captain America, yes. And so, like I said, it's very clear. Guardians of the Galaxy is really high.
Guardians of the Galaxy is very high.
I think it's because an origin story is the full arc, right? Like the sequels all kind of start somewhere in the middle. And I think sometimes if you start somewhere in the middle, it's hard to build the full arc that I crave in a story. So
then where does Thor fall short then when it comes to an origin? Because he wasn't as high.
So you know what it is that Thor is like super duper powerful from the very beginning.
He gets him sucked away. He gets his powers literally taken from him.
Away.
Gets turned into a human.
Have you watched What If? Just total side note.
I have not.
Okay. Well, you should watch What If and we'll talk about
Okay,
it.
I need to watch What If, but
Um,
yes.
Nobody
Anyway,
understands why I alluded to that. Anyways, um, yeah, I
they
love
also
Thor.
center it on a love story. I think that's the big problem. I mean, they do with Captain America too, but they have great chemistry. Like him and Peggy just have this great chemistry.
And also, it's not really that centered on the love story. It's really more centered on like his journey and like this whole question of like a truly good man. What does a truly good man need, and what would you get when you give power to a truly good man, and what does that mean? And there's so much with like Red Skull and all like and Bucky, and that's its own separate love story. There's so much more to Captain America than just Captain America and Peggy, whereas Thor is very much focused on Thor and Jane Foster.
Well, because, and I guess that's the other thing is he does get his powers taken from him, so he can't like we spend a lot of time just running around Earth trying to figure out science, like talking science nonsense.
So
there's
Thor
not
is
fight scenes.
Thor is more fish out of water
yes.
than it is like origin story, really. Right, because you're it's not much of an origin story, right? Because again, like Thor is powerful. It's basically he's a god. He's been powerful his entire life. It's not a new thing, really. It's a bump in his road. It's a struggle. It's a new episode in his life story as a god, as the hero that forever. Like, it's not really that much of a difference in terms of like his bumps in his road, as like he has like depression in the end of the thing, and that's like that's another like bump in his hero god journey evolution as like not a human, as a being
a god being,
a human like being with emotions and experiences.
See, I know obviously Chris Hemsworth obviously bumps Thor up, but when I think of like why is Thor my favorite character in the MCU? Like, as we're talking about, I'm like, ugh, he just goes on such a good journey. I'm sorry. Like, especially once we get through Endgame and Infinity War and compare it to the character we knew at the beginning of the first Thor, I'm like, oh, he goes through such a good journey. But
I would tend to agree. Like his over the arc of the entire
whole thing,
10-year thing, he probably has the best.
And Loki, like that's the thing, Loki and too. Like especially when we account for his series, Loki goes through such a great arc. It's so
Loki
good.
is like that. He's a perfect example of the type of like villain that I love. Like he's like Jaime, right, from Game of Thrones. It's that. I love the bad boy who has to learn how to be a functional human being and like feel things and grow. It just comes down to like, I like a villain who is dynamic and like changes and isn't just like black and white. And
again,
this is good. And
this is why we both love like Magneto.
Magneto is the king of all of the villains. Like I was thinking about it in terms of like Tony Zhu Wenwu, Tony Leung's character in Shang. He's almost Magneto level, except he really just does crave power. Like his base comes from craving power and comes from like selfishness, whereas Magneto's evil like always comes from this place of like, no, he thinks that he is doing the right thing.
And he has cause. I mean, he was traumatized as a child by humans behaving deplorably. So
against people who are different.
Against people. So, I mean, he has an and same thing with Killmonger. I think that's why Killmonger works so well. He has cause. He lived a life that showed him, hey, this is shitty. And you people let us like get abused and did nothing and didn't use the power. Like you're the most powerful Black nation in the world. And you sat by as we all have been like effed over by the rest of the world. So you understand their pain. Actually, Black Panther is more of an origin story for Killmonger rather than actual T'Challa.
Yeah, absolutely. You get a full origin story for Killmonger.
Yeah. And he's a great villain. These are like some of the best villains. And speaking of that, I think X-Men, I think the first X-Men is kind of an origin for both Wolverine and his is a little bit more discovery, and of course Rogue, who literally we start the movie. The problem is Rogue doesn't really go on a good journey. She particularly
Like,
when you
oh,
take
how
into
much
account
time
the
to
other films. She actually goes back a
yeah.
little bit in her development as a human. But even in that first film, she's a little more comfortable by the end. She doesn't go on a very interesting. That's why Wolverine became the focus.
Deadpool. Sorry, I just wanted to jump into
Great origin story.
great origin story. That is a fantastic origin story.
We also have X-Men in First Class, which
Yeah.
was like a origin for James and
Yeah,
Magneto.
you know what I really liked about that one is have I've watched so much X-Men and I've heard so much X-Men and there's lots of like flashbacks and things you hear about like how Eric and Xavier like know each other and they're because there's always this storyline that they've known each other forever. But yeah, X-Men First Class was the first time that they were like, no, this is the story of how
how do you get so lucky, just speaking on that real quick, to get two prominent characters like that, Professor Xavier and Magneto, and you do two different timelines and both actors are amazing. Like you have Sir Ian McKellen and you have Michael Fassbender, who are both amazing as Magneto, and then you have Sir Patrick Stewart and James McAvoy, who are both amazing as Professor X.
I mean, I think it certainly helps that you have quite a pool to select from when you're like, we're making an X-Men movie. Like, I don't like who doesn't love the fucking X-Men?
Yeah.
Monsters, that's who.
Monsters.
Monsters who have never felt different in their entire lives.
Exactly.
Like, everybody loves the X-Men. So like it makes sense to me that you would have your pick of the litter.
But then when we hop over to the other side of the pond, DC, how do we feel they do just not even just the DCEU? So going back to Batman 1989, we can talk about Batman Begins with Christopher Nolan, Superman with Christopher Reeves, and then of course Man of Steel, Aquaman, Wonder Woman.
I'm not going to touch on the Christopher Reeves Supermans because I have not watched those since I was a child. I could not even begin to tell you.
It's really good until the end, until he literally just flies around the earth backward to reverse time.
I do remember that.
Yep. That's the hot mess of that movie for me, where I'm like, oh, no. But
Gene Hackman with hair, and I remember one thing I always remember is the lady from Indiana Jones, Marion in Indiana Jones, knowing that Clark Kent is Superman and throwing herself into a river to force him to save her. And Clark Kent just like uses his little laser eyes. It's like, like just so that she has like a log and he's like, why did you do that? That's what I remember about Christopher Reeves.
But we have Batman 89, Tim Burton.
I love the Batman movies. I don't know if that's necessarily like a great origin film. Batman Returns is like, to me, Batman Returns is like the only thing I give a shit about in the entire DCEU.
Of all of the DC films, the only one she cares about is Batman
Only
Returns.
one I give a fuck about. I mean, I gotta be completely honest. Like Batman Begins, even I'm like, meh, it's fine.
I think Batman Begins is actually a really solid origin story.
Okay. Batman Begins is a solid origin story. My two gripes with Batman Begins are Christian Bale. It's gotten a little bit better over the years. But there was this period of time where especially when he was Batman, where it was like every time Christian Bale is on screen for a good chunk of his career, it's like he is staring deeply and saying, with all of the intensity and everything and every little bit of himself, look at me act. I act so good. I'm so intense acting right now. Can you see me acting? Because I'm really good at it.
I mean, that's why he got roasted for that Batman voice. That he decided to put on.
He's like that in every film. He's just like too intense in every single fucking film that he's in. He's just like takes himself way too seriously. And like, I just find it irritating and I don't like it at all. And especially because this is what it used to really irk me, because I think Batman Begins came out when I was like in high school. What really irks me is this fucking guy acting like he's all serious and I haven't seen him in fucking Newsies. Like You do not go from singing in a terrible Brooklyn accent in a newsboy cap to I'm the most serious, real, intense actor that has ever existed.
Ren, you gotta let people grow and live.
Sure,
Oh,
grow
Ren.
and live, but also you can't just delete your entire existence.
What was your other thing that you didn't like about Batman Begins?
Oh, which again, it's not really like Batman Begins as well. I mean, this is a small gripe. I love Gary Oldman, I loved Gary Oldman, and then we learned he was a terrible human being, and it made me love him less. At the time I loved him, he was underutilized. The big thing really is, and this is not the fault of the movie, it started the gritty superhero trend that will not die. Can we make this movie literally just a black screen? Because it doesn't matter if they see anything happening, right? We need dark and we need gritty. And like it basically like it is, to me, it's everything that's wrong with the modern DC universe. Like,
I was gonna say,
that's
particularly
why I love Batman
DC.
Returns is I love the cartooniness of it. I think Tim Burton, when he was in his heyday, we need to do a whole. I can't wait for him to do a new movie, Larry, so that we can do a Tim Burton roast show. But he had the perfect amount of like comic book film. It had the fun of it being a comic book film, of it being about cartoons on paper that have come now to life and are on the screen. Like, I don't really need a real life version of Batman. It brings up too many problems in my brain of like, right? Talk about like Batman is basically assaulting mentally ill people. He's a vigilante that's like the richest man in the city that's like beating up and arresting people who are so criminally poor they have to like steal to survive. Like, don't you think you could do a lot more, Bruce Wayne, with your fucking money than one by one beat dudes who were stealing things? Come on.
I mean,
so that's what I mean. So it was fine as like a vision, right? Like Christopher Nolan had a vision for that film, and it was new, and
a whole trilogy.
Yeah, and it was. I still prefer the Tim Burton version, but it wasn't. I didn't hate it. But I definitely. It is the origin story of why DC fucking sucks.
I've not been able to escape since. Like they saw that success.
Wonder Woman is also a fantastic origin story.
They've they've started to get away a little bit recently. They finally, I think they're like with Suicide Squad. I feel like they're starting to get more of that balance. Shazam, like fun and bright, but also a little bit of stakes. So Shazam is, I think, a really fun origin story. I like Shazam a lot. I know DC fans have turned on it because it's a little bit too bright and cheery, I think.
Who are these basement dwellers?
I like Shazam.
Basement dwelling way too seriously. Come out into the light, guys. It's fun out here with the colors and the things.
Grass. So we had Wonder Woman, which I adore, and I think Wonder Woman was able to balance that pretty well, of like still having that DC feel in some of the aesthetics, but still feel hopeful. That was kind of her whole film, was hope and humanity being good.
I don't think you need that DC feel. Like it just really it feels like
that's my problem with Man of Steel. Have you seen Man of Steel?
Is it the first one?
Yeah, the first one with Henry Cavill.
Yeah.
And that's like watching the first one, like watching Wonder Woman, made me really feel like this is how I should have felt watching Man of Steel, is hopeful about humanity. Like that is the underlying idea of Superman, is this hopefulness. And leaving Man of Steel, I don't feel that. I don't feel hopeful. I feel like I just watched Batman in a Superman suit.
Right. So like, that's the thing. So I generally am not as big of a fan of Superman, just because I remember complaining about basement dwellers. I like my shit a little darker. I like a little bit more complication. Superman is overpowered, right? Like he's
Ugh.
super powerful. There's only one thing in the world that can stop him, and it's the same thing they use every fucking time. It's kryptonite bullet to kryptonite arrow, kryptonite fog, kryptonite beam. It's like
Yeah.
just this special thing. We blocked out the sun. Every once in a while, they block out the sun. But yeah, he's just so powerful that there's not a lot besides like he's been like weakened, and like as a person, he's just not a very complicated or like, you know, my original, you know, I watched Christopher Reeves, but I'll be honest, I think the core of my understanding of Superman comes from Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman with Terry Hatcher, and a very handsome man. I can't remember the name of right now.
Well, he's trash, so that's fine.
Oh, is
he is a trash human being. So
he was a hot guy in the 90s.
He who shall not be named because he has turned to garbage, much like most of those 90s icons. Yes, Hercules, I'm looking at you.
Kevin Sorbo, what a disappointment. At least Lucy,
I was gonna say, good thing I always liked Xena more.
Was better. I mean, I think I liked about Hercules is that Hercules stayed way more in the like actual mythology, even though it wasn't really in it, but it was like actually in the mythology. And Xena had its own other story going.
Xena went lesbian. We're good.
Xena lesbian. Xena had way more like conflict and stuff. The storyline was way more interesting. It like went on and into like it had arcs over the course of the season. Yeah. Anyways, we're off topic.
Anyway, enough about trash Dean Cain and Kevin Sorbo.
But that was it's 90s, right? It was very bright colors, and he was just a good, kind person, and that was what was great about Superman. And that's what makes, I mean, Superman has to be this good, kind, wholesome Midwestern boy for us to feel safe with the fact that he has all of the strength of the entire universe in his body. So that, to me, I think it was the problem with Man of Steel, is that you just didn't convey any of that goodness.
I mean, like, he let his dad die. Like, I mean, and I know his dad says it, but it's just so out of character. Like, so, there's so much I have a problem. Like, Man of Steel. People love that film. It's not the worst DC has offered. They got some worse stuff that came down the pipeline after Man of Steel, but it just isn't Superman to me. I'm sorry. I much will prefer the Christopher Reeves version. Not that Brandon Routh version, though. Superman Returns is trash.
That's the first movie I remember seeing and being like, this is garbage.
That one, way worse than Man of Steel. I'll give you that.
Yeah, that movie. And then the next one was The Village.
Woo! Right. Superman, he's a tough character to get down. And I mean, his origin story is somewhat interesting, like an alien whose planet is destroyed and is sent down to Earth.
His story is more interesting, like outside of that movie, which is they, you know, in his lore, there's way more interesting stuff happening than they end up putting into the storyline in the Man of Steel.
And of course, at this point, when it comes to Batman, when it comes to Spider-Man, I know it's hard because we know their story inside and out. Like, we've had several films to show it to us. Plus, we've had cartoons that have showed it to us. We know who's going to die. We know how they become who they become. But as you said before as well, it really shapes their character. And it really identifies who they are as people, both Bruce Wayne and Peter Parker. And it becomes tough to really root that character if you try to skip that. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I think that's maybe the problem with having 3 different Spider-Man in 20 years and 5 different Batman in 20 years.
I will say that the Christopher Nolan Batman really leans into the aspects of the origin story more than any other version of Batman.
And I think that's why I like it. Also, Cillian Murphy is a great villain that was so underutilized, I think, a little bit, and forgotten as Scarecrow, but
criminally underutilized. Scarecrow is a fucking terrifying villain.
And he does visually, he does some great things in that movie to like give you the Scarecrow thing. But then we have Katie Holmes, who is terrible. But I'm sorry, she just is not good in Batman Begins at all. But But that's neither here nor there. They replaced her promptly with Maggie Gyllenhaal for The Dark Knight because
I thought it was because she was a crazy Scientologist, and they were like, "We're over that."
Pretty much. She's back now. She's kind of working, but she's
I'm
not a great
happy
actress.
for her. I'm happy that she got out of that cult. It is a
Yes.
terrifying, terrifying thing. Good for her.
But yeah, so hero origin stories are a little bit difficult, as you heard. We're all over the place on whether they're good, some are terrible.
Some are good, some are bad. I think it just depends on the filmmaker. It depends on the movie itself. And
what we all can agree on is that Simu Liu is fine AF, and Aquafina,
Tommy
Tony Leung is also
is a fantastic actor.
Fantastic actor, and
Aquafina is overutilized.
Aquafina spoke for us all when he was forced to take off his shirt, and she was just like, "Oh, what the hell is this?
What happened to your shirt?
I've never seen you like this before, sir."
That was an excellent. It was also a good shot, right? Like I'm all about that, like the hip line. Give me that hip line. There it is.
Listen, so that's what we'll agree on here. Otherwise, the opinions on this podcast are all over the place when it comes to Shang-Chi.
Fairly on, Shang-Chi. We seem fairly on like the origin stories.
Origin stories were a little bit more similar. She likes Captain America more than I do, but it is what it is. And I like Shang-Chi more than she does. So there you go. We're just on the opposite ends there. Well,
you're racist in the comments. It's definitely going to happen now. Because I didn't like Shang-Chi, but I did like Captain America.
Whoop. Well, wherever you are listening, make sure to rate us, follow us, leave us reviews. We are now up on iTunes, Apple Podcasts. Yay! So the more ratings we get, the more reviews we get, the easier we are to find for new listeners. So it's greatly appreciated to help us out. And obviously we'll love you at least for a little bit. Can't promise for life. Sorry about it. But we
want love in the world to give. I love you as long as you deserve.
We'll love you. We'll love you for now.
Just don't be a D-bag.
Yeah, no, we'll turn on you quick. Don't worry. But leave us those ratings, leave us those reviews. If you're watching us our video version on the YouTube channel Chili Boy Productions, make sure to leave your comments down below. What did you think of Shang-Chi? Did you love it? Do you also not quite understand the hype? And what are some of your favorite superhero origin stories? Leave all of that in the comments, or you can hit us up on our Twitter, Cinema Snarks, or our Instagram, also Cinema Snarks. Ren, where can they find you if they want to come at you specifically?
Man, they will. At Ren Manley on Twitter and at RinnyPoo13 on Instagram.
Perfect. And you can find me at Chili Boy YT on Twitter and Chili Boy Productions on both YouTube and Instagram. And make sure to follow and subscribe to Ren's theater.
Yeah, Audacious Theater. Actually, I was like excited because I remembered Unbreakable as another awesome origin story.
Sorry, I thought you were going to talk about Audacious, but you know, Unbreakable's good too.
We can talk about it more when we talk about another horror film, because we're doing our Lady Killers horror serial killer immersive experience in Denver. That's more relevant. Yeah. Audacious Theater, if you're interested.
Sign up for that newsletter, buy tickets, go see the show. Well, that's all we have today. Thank you for getting snarky with us, and we can't wait to talk to you